WhiskyJason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany tasting rare and exotic whiskeys. Today I have something from Signatory Vintage. It is distilled at the Bunnahabhain Distillery, aged 10 years. First fill sherry butt finish. Distilled on the 19th of October 2010, bottled on the 6th of October 2021. Just 2 weeks short of 11 years old, so it is still a 10-year-old whiskey, and it's cask number 6. And there were 701 bottles from this sherry butt, which is a lot. Now, the unique thing about this is not cask number 6. I personally believe that Signatory Vintage is using a series of different sherry casks and testing different types of sherries. We've had that in some of their other bottlings here with very, very low numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 8, 9, 13, and so on. So we now have cask number 6. The very unique thing about this is it's 65.5% ABV. That's high. All right, I know bourbon's possible, but why in all the world do you put whiskey with 65.5% plus? Yeah, I'm going to say this is probably going to be 10 years ago. This was 72% into a sherry cask, a first fill sherry cask. A first fill sherry cask originally had alcohol in it around 20% sherry. So there's hardly any sherries above that. And so you don't need to have it so high to pull anything out of the wood because it didn't happen beforehand. Now, if it was a second, a third, a fourth fill sherry cask, that's when you go up in proof. Yeah, so you start at 63.5, and then you go up to 64.5 or 65, and then 67 and 69 and 72. So every time you go higher after you've used that cask once and twice and third time. But this was a first fill sherry cask. And it, sherry butt, to be honest. And we don't exactly know why, or I don't know what's going on here. All right. What would you pay for this? So, you ready? The official recommended retail price is 104 euros and 90 cents. Now, some people are selling this already for 99 euros, but it's still just 5 euros off. So 100 plus euros for this bottle. All right, there's 700 of them and just for Germany exclusive. What am I going to compare it to? Well, what else? Bunna 12 Cask Strength Edition 2021. 55.1%. This is without a doubt the best Bunna I've ever had in a glass. People all over the world love Bunnahabhain. I like some of the Bunnas. I've had some good ones. I've had some not so good ones. But this is definitely by far the best. And it's 30 euros cheaper. 75 euros, 74.90 is what I paid for this. Now, the biggest problem with this is it evaporated. It's gone. It was on sale it was available for 2 days basically in Germany, and all the stores sold out immediately. Why? Because there's this pent up demand for great Bunna whiskey at a fair price. And this is great, and this was fair. All right, so the question is, will this 10-year-old at 65.5 from Bunna actually be able to hold its own against this 12-year-old at 55.1? So the first thing I do notice is a definite color difference. As I said, they're experimenting with different types of sherry. It does not say oloroso sherry. It does not say palo catado. It does not say fino. It does not say Pedro Jimenez. It does not say muscatel. It says sherry. First fill sherry butt, and that can be anything with an oxidative maturation at a bodega in the triangle around Jerez. So this is much browner. This has a much redder hue to it. Where that red came from, I do not know. All right, so very good. Now, the second thing I want to mention here, just not the color, is we used to believe, me included, that independent bottlers have cheaper and better juice. So I'm going to prove to us that that's no longer the case. It might have been the case in the 1990s, 2000s, 2010s, maybe even up to about 2020 roundabout. But then everything, the tipping point has been reached. We noticed it because all the independent bottlers started building their own distilleries because they started looking in the future and like, we're not going to have good juice in the future. We need to actually have something we can trade with. We're going to have to actually have something we can produce ourselves. And so they started making their own, either building their own distilleries or buying distilleries. Gordon MacPhail with our Ben Romach began, Signatory Vintage, bought Edredauer, Hunter Lang built Attendahoe, and we just go down the line here of the different distilleries, the different independent bottlers that now own distilleries as well. And so it's no longer the case that independent bottlers are a guarantee for better priced whiskey that tastes also better. Often, and that's my personal opinion here, it's worse tasting than the original bottlings, and it's more expensive. Especially in the last 2 to 5 years, that trend has been happening very, very, very much so, at least over here in Europe. Good. 65.5%. I am not a fan of single malt Scotch whiskey over 60% normally. I am definitely not a fan of over 65.5%, but this was a German exclusive. I knew I had this, so I was like, hey, maybe this could be actually an alternative because this is available in Germany at the moment. Of 700 bottles in Germany, it takes a little while unless someone really overhypes it and people go, oh, best whiskey I've had in 10, 20 years, and then people buy it. But I have not heard anyone say that about this at the moment. This was recently added, so this came out basically in the market end of December, and now we have it in our glass here at the end of February 2022. Now, I do get the leather. I do get that, I get a cherry, like a cherry lollipop, like cherry cough syrup. But what I also get is I get an artificial caramel moment here that I don't like. A little bit of furniture polish and a tiny, tiny little bit of mocha coffee. I'm not a big fan of coffee in my whiskeys. I can smell this, and it's definitely absolutely amazing how soft the 65.5% ABV is here. It doesn't burn. A tiny little whiff of alcohol. Very, very nicely done. On the nose, it's promising with some warning signs. It's not totally green on my traffic light. It's turning yellow, and I'm worried a little bit, but it might just be an illusion. Over here, our Buna 12. Much more of a darker leather. I get the plums. I get a tiny little bit here of that furniture polish, and I get a lot of this deep, dark raisins, plums, and fruitiness. I've said this before, and I'm going to say this again. The best Bunnahabhain I've ever had in my life. I have fallen in love with this. As soon as it's back on the market, I'm going to buy a few of these. This is fantastic. Yeah, the experience should be you're in the warehouse of Bunnahabhain, straight from the cask, boom, in your glass, and you try it and you go, wow. This is, for me, from Buna, the bottle of wow. So this has a very tough job to beat this. 55.1%, absolutely drinkable. Water is not needed. Beautiful, beautiful whiskey. 65.5%, I would guess they put it in the cask at 72. Ouch. All right. Cheers. I'm worried a little bit. This just absolutely draws all the saliva out of your gums. And then there's a burn. There's an alcohol burn, 65.5%. If I were in Kentucky, I would say it's a Kentucky hug. So it's a Buna hug here. Wow. That's a blast of alcohol. That absolutely disrupts my entire tasting experience. It's too strong. I'm just too weak. Now, towards the end, now there's a somewhat long finish. It's very dark chocolate. Think 85% chocolate. Think baking um, cocoa. Yeah, so not the cocoa you put in your milk chocolate with sugar. No, baking cocoa. Really, really potent cocoa. Almost over to a mocha, almost over to a coffee type of moment here. Um, that artificial, I'm going to call it artificial cherry and artificial caramel moment are still here. Um, wow, that's a woozy. Way too much for little old Jason's here. I'm going to bring it down to like 55% so I can compare these two. I do know that this is somewhat more my favorite, to put it in a very, very simple term. Now, in the nose, it gets better with water. This whiskey gets better with water. I have not been able to kill this whiskey yet. I'll have to do that with, I'm going to do that with this glass. Wait a second. I'm going to bring this down below 40%. I'm going to try to dilute it so far that I'm going to go down between the 20 and the 30% ABV range. Get a light sour moment. A little bit of lemon, a little bit of grapefruit that I did not get before. Maybe even a little bit of ginger. Interesting. Mm-hmm. A totally different beast. It's amazing. The alcohol is still very, very, very um, present. It's still strong. I would say I diluted this down to 30%, even though there's a bite, there's a sharpness to the alcohol there. It is only almost 11 years old. There's like an orange marmalade moment going on here. There is a little bit of that raisins of the sherry and so on. That does help me personally to dissect this whiskey a little bit more, to do that every once in a while. I would not recommend always diluting it, but I would recommend diluting this whiskey down to maybe around 48%. Why? Because when I did it at 55%, it was still too strong for me. Now, this whiskey is a C minus D plus whiskey straight out of the bottle. It's just way too much. It punches you in the face and just gives you like a sucker punch. That's what I want in a whiskey. If I dilute this whiskey down to about 55%, I get less of the alcohol, a little bit more of that sherry type of moment, but yet it's still too strong for me. When I dilute it further down to 48%, I've done this already in my German video. This actually turns into whiskey which has that sweetness, has that complexity. It doesn't have the heat, it doesn't have the punch, but it has a depth to it which still cannot rival this, but makes this whiskey actually a C plus whiskey. So without water, C minus, D plus. With water, a little bit down, about 55%. We're still at the C. And going all the way down to like 48%, we get to have a whiskey that turns into a C plus. And that's where I'm at here. 1 second. Mm-hmm. Very enjoyable. Still a little bit of that cherry moment more than I want. That sherry, that red sherry that's going on here. Now the question is, do I want to buy a whiskey for 100 plus euros, dilute it down from 65.5% to 45%, let's say that, and then enjoy it? No, I'm not going to buy a whiskey for 100 euros and then dilute it down the whole time. So I think at the moment, my personal opinion is that Scotch over 65% rarely, I didn't say never, rarely can convince me to be a great whiskey. This at 46%, C plus, actually not bad. This, on the other hand, was a B plus, and this is one of the best. This is the best Buna I've ever had. Value for money, by the way, D. I do not recommend buying this whiskey for 100 plus euros. Not even 11 years old. and it's just way too undiluted, way too brutal. This, on the other hand, with 55.1% cask strength batch edition 2021, fabulous, fabulous. Hmm. I don't want to swallow. I want to enjoy. I want to spend the next 3 minutes just savoring the whole experience that I have on my taste buds. This is a fabulously created whiskey. And that's a little bit of our difference. Single barrel, one single cask, take it or leave it. This is a combination of different casks, more sherry than bourbon, but a combination. Someone actually blended and made this. And they did a more than excellent job, in my opinion. So, what can we learn? First, we can learn that original bottlings often are much better than independent bottlings. Second of all, we can learn that independent bottlings are more expensive than standard bottlings now in many, many cases. And third of all, we can learn that Scotch between 55 plus minus 3% ABV is yummy, yummy for my tummy. And Scotch around 65 will burn the taste buds off your tongue if you're not careful. All right, so that's my learning curve today. So first question of the day is, what is your favorite single malt Scotch? Or sorry, what is your favorite whiskey over 65% from Scotland? So that means it could be a grain. It doesn't be a single malt Scotch. So what is your favorite whiskey over 65% ABV from Scotland? Do you have one? Is there one? Can it be that there is something out there over 65% that is totally delicious? More often than not, I'm going to say no. All right, Whiskey Jason here, whiskey from the viewpoint of an American over here in Germany, tasting rare and exotic whiskey. This is rare and exotic, 701 bottles, not my cup of tea. This is sold out and almost impossible to get, but yet the best Buna I've ever tasted. So maybe if you ever see the 12 in cask strength anywhere and you can buy it and you see it and it's under $100, buy it. If it's under $120, think about it. This is an excellent, excellent, excellent whiskey. Thank you very much. Share, subscribe, and tell others. All the best. Bye-bye.